Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So Minnesota's woman-only prison is now accepting male inmates who claim to identify as women. The worst thing is, some of these inmates have been convicted of the most heinous crimes against children. Yet they get to complete their sentence in a women's prison simply because they claim to be women. So the Department of Correction in Minnesota adopted a new gender policy in 2023 as a result of a settlement due to a lawsuit that was filed by inmate Christina Lusk. So they changed their policy as part of the settlement.
For the first time within the Minnesota Department of Corrections, a transgender inmate will be moved to a facility matching their gender identity.
This is part of a settlement that includes a nearly $500,000 payment for the inmate as well. Last year, Christina Lusk, a transgender woman, sued the DOC over access to gender-affirming care and requested a transfer to the state's only all-women prison.
Ben Henry spoke to her attorneys today about the impact they hope this has for the several other transgender inmates also trying to be moved.
As far as we're concerned, gender justice, this is long overdue.
Jess Braverman is legal director for nonprofit Gender Justice.
It's really important that transgender people are treated with the same rights, respect, and dignity as everyone else. And that's true whether they're inside or outside of an incarcerated setting.
One of their clients, Christina Lusk, is in prison, currently held at the Moose Lake facility for a 2018 drug conviction. That will soon change. Next week, Lusk, who's identified as a transgender woman since 2008, will move south to the Shakopee Women's Only Prison. The Minnesota Department of Corrections settled a lawsuit with Lusk that sought access to gender-affirming care and the transfer to Shakopee. It's the first time in Minnesota a transgender inmate will be moved to a facility matching their gender identity.
We really hope that this lawsuit, the settlement, helps not only our client but other incarcerated transgender people, and that's Miss Lusk's hope as well.
How's she doing?
She's doing great. She's really thrilled and pleased with the outcome.
Lusk, writing in reaction, "This journey has brought extreme challenges, and I have endured so much. My hope is that no one has to go through the same set of circumstances." As part of the settlement, Lusk and other inmates will now be able to receive gender-affirming care. In a statement, the DOC says it's constitutionally obligated to provide medically necessary care for incarcerated people, which includes treatment for gender dysphoria.
This is not a unique situation. There are other transgender people in prisons all around the country and here in Minnesota. Minnesota, unfortunately, hasn't been putting transgender people in the appropriate placements, and that should change, we hope.
The DOC says they house 48 transgender inmates and that 5 others have requested a transfer. According to the settlement, transgender or gender nonconforming inmates can ask for a transfer, quote, unless doing so would increase the risk of physical or sexual harm to the inmate or others in that facility. The DOC says they're also creating a gender identity committee to review single cell assignments, showering arrangements, and search protocols.
So due to this change in policy, the floodgates have been opened and 5 transgender inmates have been moved to a women-only prison. At least 2 of these inmates have been convicted of crimes against young girls. 2 of these inmates are sexual predators. And this isn't considered a threat to the female inmates. This isn't considered a threat to their safety. Not only can they request to be moved to a women's prison, they can also demand gender-affirming care on taxpayers' dime. You saw that trans activist there in that segment. A woman advocating for men to be moved to a women's facility. Once again, the women and the well-being of the women, of the females, is never the priority. Their priority are the men who claim to identify as women. Their priority includes sexual predators, murderers, violent thugs, men who are a danger to society. That's their priority at the moment. So the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Shakopee is the only prison that houses women. Women's prisons are typically operated at a lower level of security than men's prisons. The prison houses around 500 women at different levels of custody. Women reformers pushed for the creation of a women's prison in the 1910s, arguing that women needed a space separate from men and with a focus more on rehabilitation rather than punishment. And this facility has been opened since 1920. So among these 5 inmates, we have Elijah Thomas Berriman, 26, who was first arrested in April 2022 and accused of SAing a minor multiple times. He pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct in March of this year, and according to Minnesota DOC website, is currently serving his 25-year sentence at the women's prison. Another, Sean Wingderland, 35, SA'd 2 6-year-old relatives and posted videos of the acts and the grooming on corn sites and pedo sites. Wingderland admitted to engaging in this type of behaviour with young girls when questioned by investigators, but claimed that the children had consented. So these are some sick monsters that they're putting in the women's only prison. It's just because they say they identify as women. I've seen photos from inside the prison and their bunk beds. So people share cells. And these evil, disgusting degenerates could very well be sharing a cell room with a woman. So he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree criminal SA conduct in 2019. Wingderland is now serving a 36-year prison sentence among women at MCF-Shakopee. I have no words. They're putting criminals who are the most dangerous, who are the biggest threat to society, who are the biggest threat to women, to young girls, to children, and they're putting them in women's facilities that typically are operated at a lower level of security. The third, Bradley Richard Servio, is a convicted murderer who was serving a life sentence. Servio, 52, beat a man to death with a hammer before setting his house on fire in November of 1995. A repeat offender. Servio has several other convictions that include multiple charges of assault, burglary and theft. He was quietly transferred to the MCF-Shakopee in November 2023, a full 5 months ahead of the date that a newly drafted gender identity policy was set to take effect. Now, I'm not saying that the women's prison is full of angels and people who aren't dangerous, but these are men, dangerous men, and you're putting them in a cell room with a woman who's not going to be able to defend herself against these men. Is going to be completely reliant on the prison guards, who no doubt are going to be unable to be everywhere at the same time. And they had the nerve to say that we're not going to move them unless there's a threat to current inmates. How are these guys not a threat? How about basic common sense? It's inappropriate. I don't care how the person identifies. Biologically, they are male. I mean, just take a look at them. Because one of them decided to sue, you've changed your whole policy. What about when the women sue? Because there have been court cases where women have taken these DOCs to court because they were assaulted in prison when they should have been with women only. But a man was put into their cell and they were assaulted. We've had all sorts of things happening. So good luck with that, because the women are going to start filing lawsuits because of this. So the 2 remaining men confirmed by Redux to have been transferred into the women's prison are Nathan Charles Johnson, serving 2 years for aiding and abetting a burglary, and a trans-identified male who uses the name Christina Suzanne Lusk, but was born Craig Lusk. And Craig is the one who started the lawsuit, who started all of this in the first place. Why? Because this person was backed by a trans activist organisation. They're backing these people, supporting them to file these lawsuits that lead to these sort of policy changes that endanger women. The very person that was one of the main advocates for this individual is a woman who assists these people in filing these lawsuits, who speaks up for these people, is a woman. I don't know how she identifies, but she's advocating for men to be put in women's prisons, for predators to be put in women's prisons, who have SA'd children, young girls. And most of these people, these criminals that claim to be women, are in prison for assaulting women. These ones who claim to be women, they get gratification from cosplaying women, from dressing up as women and wearing women's underwear and things like that. You're basically funding their fetishes and turning everything upside down so that they can live out their fetish. How sick is that? Government funded. So Lusk received almost $500,000 as part of the settlement. And this person has also had various procedures done, such as a boob job, an excessive boob job, that screams fetish, if you ask me. So this person was serving a 5-year sentence at the Moose Lake Men's Facility for possession of methamphetamine. But a trans activist organisation, Gender Justice, helped fund this person's lawsuit. And Gender Justice also received over $500,000 from Governor Tim Walz's administration. So these trans activist organisations that advocate for men to be put in women's prison are receiving government funding. So Lusk received $495,000, of which $250,000 went towards legal costs. Gender Justice also made a series of demands on behalf of Lusk, including women's undergarments. They claimed that Lusk was being discriminated against for having breasts and for wearing women's clothing. They claimed that Lusk was repeatedly misnamed and misgendered. You know, when they talk about white male privilege, I think this is exactly what they're referring to, because if this isn't it, I don't know what is. And Lusk's legal team, who were successful in winning their case, they were also titled Attorneys of the Year by Minnesota Lawyer, a legal publication.
When I was Attorney General, I learned that the California Department of Corrections, which was a client of mine, I didn't get to choose my clients.
Right, a client of the Attorney General.
A client of the Attorney General, right. Of the Office of Attorney General, that they were standing in the way of surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. And there was a specific case. And when I learned about the case, I worked behind the scenes to not only make sure that that transgender woman got the services she was deserving. So it wasn't only about that case. I made sure that they changed the policy in the state of California so that every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access to the medical care that they desired and need. And I believe it was not only, I know it was historic in California, but I believe actually it may have been one of the first, if not the first in the country, where I pushed for that policy in a Department of Corrections.
These people have no problem demanding taxpayer-funded surgeries and procedures to live out their fetishes and to fulfill their sense of entitlement. The females are told that they have to welcome these male inmates into their facilities. They're told that they have to be kind, and their consent isn't even required. And it was recently revealed that Kamala supported taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgeries for illegal immigrants and inmates. Even CNN's Erin Burnett was shocked. She also wanted to decriminalize drug possession for personal use. It's important that transgender individuals who rely on the state for care receive the treatment they need, which includes access to treatment associated with gender transitions. She wrote this in the questionnaire.
Tonight, Kamala Harris releasing details of her policy positions for the first time on her campaign website. A K-file investigation has uncovered, meantime, a 2019 questionnaire. And in this questionnaire, Harris laid out some much more liberal stances, among them on immigration. So in 2019, in what K-file found, she said she would cut funding to ICE, writing, quote, "Our immigrant detention system is out of control, and I believe we must end the unfair incarceration of thousands of individuals, families, and children. I was one of the first senators after President Trump was elected to advocate for a decrease in funding to ICE." Well, now, of course, she's touting the Biden administration's executive order to crack down on the border. K-File's Andrew Kaczynski joins me now. Andrew, that's pretty incredible on its own when you're talking about what you found here on ICE. What else did you find?
Yeah, and this was a questionnaire that she filled out for the ACLU, and this questionnaire is really an interesting snapshot in time of that 2019 Democratic primary. Kamala Harris was trying to get to the left of Bernie Sanders. She was trying to get to the left of Elizabeth Warren, and you really see that in a lot of these answers. And I want to walk our viewers through a little bit of what she said. Let's just take immigration and look at what she said here. She said on immigration, she made this open-ended pledge to end immigrant detention. She said she supported taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She also said she
taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She actually said she supported that.
She both wrote and answered in the affirmative when she was asked this. Oh. And she said she also supported it for federal prisoners. Now, she also pledged to slash immigration detention by 50%, close all family and private facilities, and decrease funding for ICE, and then end ICE detainers with local law enforcement.
I mean, these are things that, you know, it would be hard to think that you would come up with taxpayer funding gender transitions for detained migrants, and yet this, as you say, written and verbally.
She's trying to get her head around that whole concept of taxpayer funded transition procedures for migrants and federal prisoners. Like, she seemed pretty perplexed. And this is somebody who works for CNN, so probably leans left. And Kamala's extreme, even for her. So when they reached out to Kamala's campaign team, they didn't have much to say. Just a load of word salad.
They responded to you on her changes on these issues.
So we did put this question to the Harris campaign about the entire ACLU questionnaire, and the Harris campaign didn't answer any questions from CNN. Instead, they just provided a statement from an unnamed Harris campaign advisor that just said the vice president's positions have been shaped by 3 years of effective governance as part of the Biden-Harris administration. Now, they declined to CNN to elaborate on what those positions were. And then they also provided this statement, which they attributed to a spokesperson saying, as president, she will take that same pragmatic approach, focusing on common sense solutions for the sake of progress. So where does she stand on this, all this questionnaire today? We don't know, and they won't say.
It's pretty incredible stuff. And thank you very much, Andrew.
Pretty incredible stuff, indeed. And we're yet to find out where she stands on all of these topics today compared to back then. You saw from the recent debate, she never answered the question. I don't need to tell you the risks of putting male inmates in women's prisons, much less male predators, murderers. But what we have had are women being essayed. We've even had women getting pregnant as a result of these policies. Because at the end of the day, men do not belong in women's prisons. And we shouldn't be rewarding bad behaviour and calling it activism. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.